In the early 1960s, an American president discovered the perfect way to terrify a guest without ever raising his voice. He'd simply drive them down a boat ramp at his Texas ranch, wait until the car was rolling toward the water, and calmly announce that the brakes had failed. This is the story of the Amphicar, the only mass-produced car in history that could actually drive into a lake, and how it became President Lyndon Johnson's favorite practical joke. The Amphicar was the creation of a German engineer named Hans Trippel, who had spent years building amphibious vehicles, first for civilian use before the war, and later for the German military during it. After the war, Trippel was actually arrested by French authorities and served 3 years in prison as a war profiteer for his wartime work. Once released, he turned back to the same basic idea, but this time aimed squarely at ordinary civilians, and specifically at the booming American outdoor leisure market of the 1950s. The finished design debuted at the Geneva Auto Show in 1959 and reached full production readiness by 1961 when it was unveiled to the American public at the New York Auto Show. It was called the Amphicar Model 770, a name built from its 2 top speeds, 7 knots in the water, 70 miles an hour on land. Under a rear hood shaped more like a boat's engine well than a car's trunk, the Amphicar used a British-built Triumph Herald engine and drove a pair of reversible propellers when it was in the water, steering the whole time using its regular front wheels, the same way it did on the road. It looked strange, and it was strange, unusually tall for a production car, with prominent rear fins that weren't just styling, they were functional, keeping water from pouring into the engine bay through the cooling vents while the car was swimming. The whole machine sat noticeably higher off the ground than any normal automobile of the era, giving it an almost cartoonish silhouette that either delighted people or unsettled them, depending who you asked. It was also expensive, roughly twice the price of a Volkswagen Beetle, for a vehicle that, frankly, wasn't outstanding at either of the 2 things it was built to do. On land, it handled like an ordinary small car of the era, nothing more. In the water, top speed topped out around 7 miles an hour, closer to a lazy paddle than a proper boat. Despite that, Trippel's factories in West Germany managed to build nearly 3,900 of them between 1961 and 1965, with leftover stock trickling out to buyers as late as 1968. The vast majority, roughly 90%, were sold in the United States. It did have its moments of genuine glory. In 1965, 2 Amphicars successfully navigated the Yukon River in Alaska. That same year, a pair of them crossed the English Channel, refueling mid-crossing through a snorkel rigged into the fuel tank because the standard tank wasn't nearly large enough for the whole trip. But its most famous moment in America had nothing to do with rivers or channels. It had to do with a Texas ranch. President Lyndon Johnson acquired his Amphicar, painted in the company's lagoon blue color, in 1962, the year before he became president, and he immediately understood exactly what he'd been handed. At his ranch in the Texas Hill Country, Johnson would load an unsuspecting guest into the car, drive them on a casual tour of the property, and steer toward a steep incline leading straight down to the lake. As the car picked up speed heading toward the water, Johnson would suddenly act alarmed, insisting the brakes had failed and there was nothing he could do. His guests, having no idea they were riding in an amphibious vehicle, generally reacted exactly the way you'd expect. One frequent victim was Joseph Califano, Johnson's own special assistant for domestic affairs, who later described the moment in his own memoir, the panic of feeling the car plunge into the water, and the sudden, confused relief of realizing it was floating, not sinking. Johnson, by every account, found the whole thing endlessly funny, and reportedly kept a Secret Service agent trailing behind in a separate car, just in case any prank ever actually needed rescuing from. Commercially, the Amphicar never really worked out. The price was steep, the performance on both land and water was modest at best, and by the late 1960s, tightening American vehicle safety and environmental regulations made it increasingly difficult to keep selling the leftover inventory in the country that had bought the overwhelming majority of them in the first place. Production quietly ended. Today, roughly 600 Amphicars are believed to still exist in the United States, prized by collectors who gather at lakes for what owners call swim-in meetups. President Johnson's own Amphicar is preserved and on display at the LBJ Ranch to this day, a strange little blue car that never quite found its market, but very definitely found its purpose, terrifying one very specific president's dinner guests, one boat ramp at a time. Do you think the Amphicar could have found real commercial success with better marketing, or was a car that's mediocre at being both a car and a boat, always destined to be a novelty? Let me know what you think in the comments.